Welcome along. This is the preview to race 7 from series 4. That's race 4.7 in the West London VR series, 16 kilometre long races. We're starting here, in fact just behind us was the top of the climb known as Kingston Blount. I think Simon Warren in his books of Great British Climbs, or whatever he calls them, 100 Best Climbs Volume 2, calls it Kingston Hill. Kingston Blount is the actual name that the locals call it. It comes out from Kingston Blount at the bottom. That was the top where we just started, and we're heading towards Stokenchurch. So essentially, if you are British, if you want a reference point, we're sort of north of High Wycombe, heading towards High Wycombe if you like, and we're absolutely parallel with the M40 motorway that runs from Birmingham to London. So we're heading in what I'd loosely call a southeasterly direction, and you can in fact see the map. I've reproduced the Ride with GPS profile and map in the bottom right hand corner of your screens. Now the first thing you'll notice when you look down from the map is the profile, and you'll see that basically this is a downhill race. And what I sought to do when plotting this route was to make a downhill route that had a couple of little bumps in to facilitate attacks. And if you look closely at the profile, you'll see there are some bumps along the way. There's one just before the big descent, so you can see on the profile there we're quite high up, and then there's this big descent, and then a gradual descent at a lower altitude. So the first bump is just before the big descent, and there's several along the bottom there. Now I have to be honest and say that when I rode this, I didn't think the bumps were quite as difficult as I perceived them when I mapped the route out, and I think there'll be less attacking on those bumps than you might think. There's only really one down in the valley, and there's one just before the big drop where I think you can really attack. We'll have a look at those when we reach them. But the idea of the Hambleden hurdles was that yes, it's a downhill race and you'll have some speed, but the hurdles with the little bumps along the way. As I say, when I rode it, I think they're probably not as difficult as I perceived them on the map, and I think certainly in a peloton people are going to be able to draft their way up them fairly easily. So this might just be a race to the bottom, as it were, and a race downhill. So we are in a place called Stokenchurch, and it is, as I say, probably northwest of High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. And as I say, for a while now we're going to be following the course of the A40, which is to our right, just south of us, I suppose, as we go through Stokenchurch. Stokenchurch, if you ever travel along the M40, you might see there's a great big tower there with lots of broadcasting. There's a big broadcasting mast there that you can see from the A40, and that's roughly where Stokenchurch is. In fact, we have passed it, but I think it wasn't on the picture. This is Stokenchurch. It's coming to the village. There's a little cycling, there's a cafe just on your right there, this pub on the left. I always remember coming down here one day and Stoke City were playing a game at Wembley, and it was absolutely invaded by Stoke City fans who'd pulled off the motorway and chosen this place to have their drinking session before the match because it had the word Stoke in Stokenchurch. I can't remember how Stoke City got on that day, but I hope they had a good time in Stokenchurch. And we go through this I suppose reasonably sized village. As I say, there's a cafe on the green there, which to be honest, if you ride this way you can't see, and when I did ride up to film this, saw the cafe for the first time as I came in the other direction, and stopped and had a very nice cup of coffee, and I will be using it on cycle rides again. So as I say, this is the A40, but we're going off it now, and we're going onto this road here, which we will stay on for a little while before doing the sharp right. And if you look at the map on the bottom right hand corner, you'll see that the sharp right drops us down into the valley. We go through Fingist and Skirmit and villages like that on our way to Hambleden. We go through Hambleden, and we actually end at a place called Mill End, which is slightly confusing because it's you won't be able to see the River Thames on the videos, but it stops at the River Thames, and there's a weir there which is called Hambleden Weir. even though we're in Middle End. So it's basically a race towards Hambleden and Hambleden Weir, and it's mostly downhill. There's not a lot to say other than when we get out of these houses, it undulates a little bit. As I say, when I did the profile, I thought the undulations would actually be quite fun in the race, but in real life riding it, I was slightly disappointed. So I don't think it's going to be as critical as we might have thought. Never mind. Downhill is always interesting. It fascinates me in RGT races that I can't seem to go downhill as fast as some other people, and I'm not entirely sure why. Of course, nobody free wheels downhill, so I suppose if you do keep cycling in an RGT race, the stronger pedallers will get the advantage and break away. So if you look at the big descent about halfway through the route, that may well be a surprising attack point, the actual descent. So look out for that one, and hurdles might just be a little bit wrong in their sort of conception, because the hurdles were meant to break up the race, but it might actually be the descent where everything's decided. And if you look, that little ramp up just before the descent is probably the place to attack, because if you break away then and then get a good descent, you are going to probably cause yourself a gap, or you and probably a few others, and the peloton can probably split in a combination of that rise just before the big drop. And we swing to the right in a moment, and we go across the M40 motorway, but we carry on going parallel with it. Instead of being on our right, it'll be on our left as we go up. So there is a slight climb here. I don't think it's going to really register, but again, be aware of it. This is the bridge over the M40 motorway, and as I say, we would swing a sharp left as we go over the motorway. You can see it under the bridge there. We're going to do a sharp left and then follow the course of that motorway for a while before we do that sharp right and drop steeply down into Fingist and beyond. Now this road does have a few undulations, not big ones, so it might be worth you just having a quick look and understanding the layout of this road. I think sort of riding solo, I know it was slightly deceptive because I rode up this road to the start and I rode into a headwind and suddenly found it easier going in this direction because the wind was behind me. So I might have been kind of fooled about how difficult this ride was because I had a tailwind. So it might actually be slightly harder on an RGT race. I could be wrong, but notwithstanding, there are some very slight undulations in this bit of road. The motorway is literally just the other side of this fence and hedge on our left. You are going downhill here. Again, as I say, when I rode up to the start, I was riding. This is a very small gradient here, so of course I was riding uphill into a wind, so it seemed quite hard coming up to the start. But going this way felt very, very easy whilst filming this. Not a lot to report because it's quite straight too, but you can probably just see in the horizon there these slight undulations that it does have coming up ahead of us. You're obviously going down and you see the car coming up the hill there, but obviously there's a slight undulation just coming up as we go down this dip. But again, I think the peloton will carry you up these and they're not going to be as difficult as I perceived when first. So we're going up here, but you can see it's not very long before we're back on the flat, and it's not very steep either, because overall we're going downhill all the time. Again, it's downhill here, but with a very small undulation you can just see on the horizon coming up. You can obviously see a horizon there on the road surface, but as I say, this is mainly downhill, so you should be doing good speeds until just before. And I say, look about halfway on the profile on the map on the bottom right hand corner, and you'll see it does go up before we do that big dip into the valley. And the big dip into the valley, as I say, if you look at the map above you, is where we do that sharp right about halfway down the course, and that's off this road. So basically the top half of that course you can see on the map, we're going down this road, and we do that sharp right down a very steep descent. We end up with a little bit of a twisty bend at the bottom, and then then we do the valley down into Fingers, which has, as I say, there are undulations there. Probably the biggest one is around Skirmet, but as I say, it's the others. I was slightly disappointed when I rode it. They're not quite as difficult as I perceived. And I did do it on RGT before as well, and they seemed, to be honest, they did seem a little bit more difficult in RGT than they did riding this course. But remember, when I'd have done them on RGT, I'd have done them solo, and I wouldn't have the benefit of the peloton, which is why I think they're not going to be as significant as I perceived when I first rode it on RGT. So it is what it is. So as I say, I think the key to this race is the halfway point, the slight uphill, then the big drop is going to be what decides this race, I think. If not, it'll be a sprint finish, and it may be a combination of the two, because of course that split, or any splits caused by that slight uphill before the descent and then the descent itself, any splits caused will probably not be solo splits. There'll probably be groups of maybe 15-20 riders, so it'll probably still be a sprint finish at the end. So we're beginning, as you can see, it's just a little bit. We're rising uphill a little bit. As I say, it's not a great gradient. It's not going to hurt too much, but this is the uphill section just before the right-hander and the drop. It goes on for a little while, as you can see from the map. It's not it's a gradual ascent. It's not a sharp ramp or anything like that. But as I say, if you can get a group that attacks on this, people on the back end of the peloton will begin to drop off, and I think that's how you thin it down. And remember, thinning down the peloton is worth it for the major players, because of course if you let everybody get to the end in like some of the really flat races we do, you might find that some people who don't normally make it to those sprint finishes can sprint a little bit in the last knock-ins, and some of the favourites lose places to the lesser knowns, which is fantastic for the neutral like me. But as I say, for the guys going for the series here, it's probably not a bad idea to thin down the peloton, even if you take a few of your rivals with you, because it guarantees that even if your rivals beat you, you don't lose too many places. And remember that these series are done on points, not on time. So you might finish a split second behind somebody, but 10 places back and lose 10 points. So it is all to play for. It's tactical. The guys who do well in these series know exactly how the game works. Make sure you're on their level and aware of what they're up to. So as I say, I think this is, as you can see, it's going uphill. You can see the rise. It's not steep, but if you launch attacks here, I think it can be significant. This is the rise before the drop. And so when you get to the drop, you'll see that it's going to be very, very fast, the drop. I think you'll be up into some very high speeds when you get the drop. And of course, to some extent, I think you can do them faster on RGT than I would dare do them on in real life, because in real life I've got the prospect of a car coming the other way, so don't quite take the bends as fast as we might on an RGT race. So you can see it's still gradually climbing here. This is this ascent before the drop. So it's attritional. You don't need to, it's not a ramp where you just need to sort of, go hard at it for sort of, 20-30 metres and cause a split. This one's attritional, so if you can get a group of you to really put the power down, you could probably lose quite a few people. So inevitably, this isn't a total climb. As I said, it's a gradual climb. Speed up a little bit as things level out. We will be dropping that right-hander very, very soon. The scenery doesn't change a lot along here. It's just green and pleasant British scenery, and benefit from a bit of sunshine and the wet weather as we hang the right. Now this is the drop. You can see this is a wooded lane for most of the way, then opens out into fields at the bottom. It's a fantastic climb coming up because it makes you work a little bit. Going down, as you can see, it's okay, but you can't quite see far enough, and if a big truck comes the other way, it can be a bit hairy. Let's hope one doesn't come along up here. Oh my God, there's just because I mentioned a big truck, one comes. You can see there's not the greatest of space to get down the side of it. So we come out of the wooded area, and it's very bright as we go into the valley that leads us down to Hambleden. This is a fantastic view. Unfortunately, the GoPro doesn't do it credit, because the GoPro is on my handlebars, and obviously my head's a little bit higher and can see over the hedges, whereas the GoPro, being on the handlebars, does not pick out the wonderful view down the valley. But never mind. I can assure you, it's particularly on a sunny day like this, it is quite a nice little view. You can kind of get a glimpse of the way the land's rising to either side of us, because this is straight down a valley. The first village is Finjes. If anybody wants any references, when we get to the bottom, you see a little bit of the valley, but we're lower down now, so you don't kind of get that long view for a few miles. But if you want a reference here, when we get to the bottom of this hill, there's a left-hand turn which takes you to Marlow, and many cyclists will know Marlow. It's one of those cycling destinations where there's a few cafes, and it's full of cyclists on a weekend. But we're not far from there. It's a left at the bottom of this hill. As I say, the hedge is not giving you the best possible view, but just take my word for it. Now, you've got these little twisty bends at the bottom. You've got this right-hander, and then a particularly sharp left-hander which takes us into the valley road, which, as I say, when you're descending in real life, you have to brake a little bit. You can see it coming up here. You can't see round, so you don't know what's coming up the other way. And if you are hearing down the middle of the road and it's something big and bulky, you could be in a bit of trouble. So a little bit of caution as we go around the final bit. There we are. This is it. You see quite a sharp bend. That will be a sharp bend on RGT, so expect some braking there. You don't have to brake, it does it automatically, and you get a very quick glimpse of what the valley sort of looks like, even though we are now down in the valley and not up the top. Now, this is again a fast road. We're on the descent, so if you look at the profile at the bottom right hand corner of your screen again, we are now at the bottom of that big drop, and you can see it's still dropping. It goes all the way down to the River Thames. I'm sure there must be a river along this valley, but I don't know what it's called. As we head towards the first village, which will be Finjes. Now, there is a little bump up around Finjes and Skirmet, so keep your eyes open. We're still going downhill right now, and this will continue for a little while. This is not Finjes yet. These are just the outbuildings, a few farms and cottages just before we get there. You'll know when we get there because there's a pub on the left and a church on the right. And if you go right, you go up a very steep hill after a little while, and you can see just on the horizon to the right there, you can see the peaks of those hills, and they're quite steep getting up those, and great hill climbs. Certainly the two out of Turville, for example. Turville, a village that British people might recognise if they were to cycle through it, because it's the location where they filmed the television series that ran for several years, a couple of decades ago, called The Vicar of Dibley. But younger cyclists may not remember that. As I say, it's a couple of decades ago now. It's probably even a bit dated. I'm sure you can watch it on UK Gold Channel or something. Anyway, the road continues down. So this is quite fast. I do enjoy cycling this road. In fact, it's quite nice coming the other way even. And you can start seeing the first buildings of Finjes here, just ahead of you, and the roof there. And as I say, there's a sign on your right, the little white sign saying we're at Finjes, and a horse rider to welcome us. The pub's on the left, the church is on the right. This is the pub coming up here, with the church on the right. Every village should have a church and a pub. Not necessarily in that order, but depends on your beliefs, I suppose. So we go through here, and there's a couple of twists and turns, but we sort of go up a little bit here. So this is I think this is possibly the biggest of the hurdles that I thought. You can see it's not very long and it's not particularly hard, but that, just after Finjes, when we do those sort of twisty bits on the bends, you get the next rise. You can see it's still going up a little bit here, and it does for a while, but this is probably, out of the little hurdles in the Hambleden Valley, it's probably the most testing of it. So one last chance, I suppose, to shake people off the back. But remember, if you've just done a huge downhill, people aren't going to be in quite the agony that they might be elsewhere on the course. So probably by now, although there are a few of these little bumps left, I think you're probably not going to lose too many people. Or if you're on the back of a group, just hang on, because most of what's left you'll get over. We're going down the valley still. Inevitably it's more downhill than it is uphill, but as I say, the hurdles were the little bumps along the way that I hoped might shake the race up. I do drop down into Hambleden village. I mean, this road, I suspect in days gone by the road went through the village and they straightened it out, so if you follow this road all the way, you'll miss the village of Hambleden. But what I've done is switch this ride so it goes down into the village of Hambleden, which gives you another little slight rise coming out of the village. The village is on our left and is slightly further down the drop of the valley that we're on. So you can, as I say, that's a complimentary little ramp I put in, but it's, as I say, slightly disappointing. I didn't think it was quite as hard as I'd have liked for you, but there we are. Perhaps I'm being too kind. You never know. So we head on now into Skirmet, which again, there's another little bump around here. Whether or not it has an impact on the day, I don't know. In fact, if the groups are split up in smaller groups from the big drop, it is easy to lose people on the small groups. There's a sharp right here and you get a sharp left shortly afterwards, so just watch out for those. The usual thing on RGT, you'll get the braking effect as you go around them. Here's the sharp left, and we carry on down the valley towards the Chiltern Winery. I think I was quite surprised to find that there was a winery around here, not least because it was at the top of one of the hills to our right. So again, there's some very steep climbs up to our right. One of them, Dudley Lane, is a very well-known hill for riders. I mean, it's really steep as you go up it, and then you think you're at the top, but it carries on for another kilometre at a gentle gradient. But the damage that the steep bit has done to your legs makes it seem far worse. But there's at the top of Dudley Lane is the Chiltern Winery, and I was very surprised to find anybody was making wine up there. But nevertheless, I think they do. I think the land around here is probably based on chalk, which is good for wine growing, I understand. Not that I know anything about wine growing, but I do know that the Champagne region is built on chalk, so can't be all that bad. You can see I'm slowing down here. This is the next of these little bumps. But as I say, once we get around the bend, that's kind of it. You know, you can see the horizon up there. It's not painfully steep, but possibly enough to shake people off. But as I say, you can see the speed just gathering because I've got past it fairly quickly. It hasn't slowed me down too much. If I'd really wanted to, I could probably maintain my speed going up it. But there we are. It is what it is. It's probably still not quite flat here, actually. There's probably something of a rise, but nothing that I think will show through on an RGT race. And already now I think we're going back down again. So these undulations not particularly cutting. As you can see, this is clearly downhill, but where that van is now goes up again. So it is rolling, but I think the pace that you'll have in the race as we reach the bottom, and I just have to go up this next little ramp, the next Hambleden hurdle. You can see that even in real life I haven't really had to slow down to get over this next hurdle because of the momentum I've got from coming down the hill. So as I say, I was slightly disappointed. I don't think they were quite as disruptive as I'd hoped for, but you might be grateful, who knows. Now we are heading towards Hambleden, which is quite a picturesque little village. Unfortunately, when I was filming this, the only two motorists in the world that were going to visit Hambleden that day decided to drive through, so it wasn't quite as good pictorially as it can look. It is one of those pretty little villages that usually doesn't get any traffic because all the traffic goes along this road. what traffic there is. You can see it's not a busy road anyway, so it's very unlucky to get some traffic when I was going down there. But it is one of those villages they use for film and TV filming all the time, and some of the best bits of it we're not actually going to ride through on this particular race, because the best bit with the pub and some of the little shops is almost a dead end, so you wouldn't really need to go down there. And the other way around there, you can partly go down that road, but it takes up Pheasants Hill, which is to the left, and you can see the hills to the left in the picture there. Pheasants Hill, another long, steepish hill, quite challenging. There's some great climbing in these parts, either side of this valley, and I think there's probably about 3 or 4 roads off this valley that are quite notable climbs, and Chilterns doesn't always... it doesn't quite have the reputation of other parts of the UK. I'm not saying that they're the hardest hills, but what the Chiltern does have is a lot of them. There are a lot of climbs in the Chilterns, and if you want to look on our website, we do actually have a feature about Chiltern climbs, although you do have to sign up if you want to access it with an interactive map showing you where all the climbs are. I say all the climbs, we've got hundreds on there, and there are a few we haven't put on yet, so it's not quite all, but you'll be surprised just how many it's got. The Chilterns are phenomenal for climbs, even if they aren't the biggest, toughest, hardest climbs in the world. There are lots of them. This, however, is a downhill race, and you can still see the effect of that valley. You can see the hills to the right. You can see why those climbs up those hills are quite steep, because it rises quite sharply. It's the same on the left. We're at the bottom of the valley. You can see the hills on the left there. If you look at the horizon, you can see the hills where the way they point down to the valley. And at the end of this road, whatever the little stream is, which I believe is to our left, must go into the River Thames, because when we get to the bottom of this valley, we hit the River Thames. Yeah, I can see the hills on your left and the right now. As I say, some fantastic climbing in these parts, and lots of variations. You can just do different hills all the time. And it's relatively traffic free as well. And I think the volume of cyclists is such that we don't get so many irate drivers either. It's as popular as it is for cycling. It's one of those sort of best kept secrets, which clearly by saying that I've let out, but I'm sure that you'll understand that discretion is the best thing. Right, so here's a swing left into Hambleden village. You can see that the old road we're now on deviates into the village, whereas the modern ones will cut through that everybody uses, goes straight on. We go over this little bridge here, and as we turn here, we'll go past the past the church, past part of it, I think. Swing round to the left, and we're on what I call a village green, although it's very, very small, and as I say, you can see the link to the left is the church, although you can get to it from the village green as well. So you can see it's quite a picturesque little village, and these aren't even the best parts of it, certainly the fans and the modern building. But as you can see, as we come into the village square, it is old and worldly. Take the cars out of that, you could put any period piece in. You can see just on the right there, the bicycle outside the village shop, which is also a cafe. So if you are cycling the park in the area, that's very popular with cyclists. So it's a village shop, and does coffee and cake as well, just what you need for cyclists. Now this, because we dropped down, we're sort of slightly down valley compared to the main road which is on our right. This is one of those little hurdles as we come back up to join the main road, and the main road is rising in itself as well. So this is probably one of the last few hurdles, but again, I was slightly disappointed. I didn't feel it was as challenging as I'd hoped when devising the route, but there it is. By the time you come out of that, and you'll know because of the little twists and turns. The little twists and turns as you go into Hambleden on RGT, because of course you won't have the buildings to know that. You know that you're at Hambleden, and you're really now into the final throes of the race. So make sure you're on board in the group and keeping your eyes and wits about you, because the end is coming fairly soon. Like I say, we're out of Hambleden and we're heading for Mill End, but in reality, the area called Mill End is often referred to as Hambleden itself, because what's at Mill End is the River Thames and the Great Weir. A lot of cyclists take their bikes across. We're not going over it today, but it's fantastic. You have to walk with your bike to get across it, but it's absolutely fantastic across the river on the Weir. You would thoroughly enjoy that with all the wildlife and everything else going on. There's a lot there with boats. But that's at Mill End. But the Weir is called Hambleden Weir, so everybody confuses what is Hambleden with that village that we've been through, and we're about to finish. Now we're getting closer and closer to the finishing line here. As you can see, it's flat, it's going to be sprint, it's straight. The road slightly curls at the end, but nothing significant. I don't think you'll be braking significantly high. You can see there the sign for Mill End, we've just passed it on our left. And when you start seeing some buildings, that's the finishing line coming up. We are getting very, very close now. It's, like I say, when you start seeing some buildings, there's even a pavement, there's a sign of life, civilization. And here come the buildings. This is the beginning of Mill End and the beginning of the end as far as the race is concerned. We're going to come up to a T-junction, as you'll see. Now you can see the road just twists a little bit ahead of us. That's when we start going into the finish. So this isn't a dead straight finish, but it's not bent enough, I think, to cause any concerns with braking. You can see the buildings ahead of us on the left there. You can see the route. That is roughly where the finish is. You can see the lorry going across the T-junction in front of us just before we do this little twisty bit at the end. So we're going to do left and sort of right, so it's not really bent. And then the finishing line is where you can see that car ahead of us, just turning into our road. Here we are, that's the finish. Just the other side of those houses and bushes is the River Thames and Hambleden. Good luck!